Back. We took a little bit of a time off in the last couple weeks, so we're really excited to get back into the swing of things. Thank you for everyone who's joining us on Instagram Live. We're also hosting this on Twitter Spaces, YouTube Live, and we should get some folks strolling in on Zoom for live health coaching as well. So if you are joining us again, thank you for being a loyal listener. And if you're joining us for the first time, I'm Dr. Cam Sapam, the host of this show, and I am the CEO of Maximus, also a licensed clinical psychologist and psychiatry professor. And this show is really dedicated to optimizing health and vitality through health behavior change and hormone optimization. So we talk about diet, exercise, sleep, focus, relationships, supplements, medications, and any and all means to optimize your health so that you can feel and function your best. Every week, I like to start out with a weekly unpopular opinion and share sort of the latest and greatest insights, psychology, philosophy, or sometimes scientific findings. And this week, my unpopular opinion is that vegetables are quite overrated compared to fruits, and I want to talk about a particular fruit that really highlights it as an example. I talk to so many people talking about their diets. I have a decade-long history in the nutrition industry, was the founding medical director of Omada Health, helped develop their nutritional curriculum that's been used by 500,000 people to lose 5 million pounds. So I've spent a lot of time, especially in the obesity and diabetes space, researching and in clinical practice, talking about sort of optimal diets. And there's so much of this popular notion that in order to eat healthy, you just have to be this like salad eater, eating as much leafy green vegetables. And it's not that these things are unhealthy per se, but I do think the dose makes the poison. I've given the example. I've actually had a friend who used to have a kale smoothie every day, 3 cups of, or a spinach smoothie, I should say, 3 cups of spinach a day, developed kidney stones from the excessive amount of oxalates that are actually in spinach. And it's the same thing. Although green leafy vegetables, particularly cruciferous vegetables that are derived from the wild mustard plant, may have some anti-cancer properties, you have to remember, as a lot of people like to say, that plants basically can't run away from you, right? No organism essentially wants to be predated upon or consumed. And so because plants can't run away, they essentially use chemical defenses to deter you from eating them. Best example, of course, is the coffee bean plants and a lot of other plants, tea plants, Camellia sinensis, use caffeine as an insecticide. So literally, the insects that are trying to eat this plant get kind of whacked out of their gourd and it deters them from eating it too much. We funnily like to extract it and make a juice out of it and consume it. It's the most popular drug in the world. So it just goes to show that plants basically have a lot of what are called anti-nutrients that deter human beings and other mammals in particular from eating them. On the other hand, fruits are an interesting counterexample because fruits by definition have seeds and they rely often on birds and mammals to propagate them. They want us to consume them, which is why fruits are so sweet and delicious. In order to consume them, defecate the seeds out and use that to literally fertilize new versions of that plant. And so it has a symbiotic relationship with human beings. That's why I very much argue that if you look at ancestral eating patterns of hunter-gatherers, they actually do not eat very much what we consider to be vegetables. They're not eating very much green leafy vegetables. They're usually consuming what would be the equivalent of our berries, essentially small, not too sweet kind of berries, roots, shoots, and tubers as their form of carbohydrates. But they're much more fruit eaters, particularly seasonally in summer and late fall, than they are vegetable eaters. And so I actually advocate for more of a meat and fruit heavy diet than I do for vegetables. Not that vegetables are bad. It doesn't hurt to eat a salad every once in a while, but it should not actually be the mainstay of your diet. And I actually argue it really shouldn't even be an entree. Salads are kind of a side dish, is what I would describe them as. They provide no protein, essentially, if you think about green leafy vegetables. So they're not real food. Food, by definition, really should be protein because that's the primary macronutrient that's absolutely required. You can pretty much get away with not having very much fat, even though that's not optimal for your hormones. You can pretty much get away with not having any carbohydrates, even though that's not optimal for your hormones. But you will survive, essentially, as long as you get enough protein. If you don't get enough protein, you cannot survive. That's why it's the most important macro. So, all that being said, fruits are pretty instrumental, especially from an evolutionary perspective, for optimal human health. And so I want to talk about one really interesting fruit. So people are familiar with oranges, and particularly if you're fortunate, you've had what's called a blood orange, which is an orange that's very red and kind of bloody looking on the inside. So the interesting thing is you can almost kind of assess the potential health benefits of fruits and tubers by the coloring of them, because the pigmentation of it, like that bloody color that makes blood orange, literally the color that it is, are signs of particular phytochemicals or plant-based chemicals that are often good for us. So blood oranges have what are called these anthocyanins, which is a particular chemical that gives it that dark red color. There has flavonoids, it has hydroxycinnamonic acids, and it has, of course, ascorbic acid, aka vitamin C, that a lot of people are familiar as one of the key benefits of eating oranges and other citrus fruits. So there's different types of blood oranges, which comes from the scientific name is Citrus sinensis, but there's a particular variation of it called the Moro blood orange, and it has a notably intense red coloring because it's grown in a particular area in southeastern Sicily in Italy that has very hot days and cold evenings, and it produces more of these anthocyanins. So it just becomes this really rich, if you've ever seen a picture, you can Google it, red color. Even the rind is red itself. And so it's very, very potent in terms of its phytochemicals. So the interesting thing about this is it's been studied in terms of its health benefits for weight loss. Now, normally I'm pretty skeptical about anything that promotes weight loss because, quite frankly, there's just not a lot of compounds that have particularly compelling scientific evidence as promoting weight loss. If you watch the Dr. Oz show, he's always touting some herbal supplement like some weird cactus extract, and honestly, none of these things really do much. You know, the only drugs that really have strong scientific evidence for weight loss recently are the GLP-1 agonists, which are originally developed for diabetes, but they do help folks, and they actually have pretty compelling results on the order of 15, the most recent one, 22% weight loss. The problem with them is that they have to be taken long term. They're very expensive, and they're often injectable substances. And they work very actually analogously to other diabetic medications like metformin, which can help people lose weight, in that they do make you nauseous. So ironically, one of the purported mechanisms of action is, well, if you're nauseous, it reduces your appetite. And if it reduces your appetite, you obviously don't want to eat as much and you lose weight. I actually really don't like that, though, because obviously nausea is one of the worst feelings in the world. Even if you have mild nausea, I'd rather have mild pain than mild nausea, because you just don't feel good or optimal if you've ever had just even like mild food poisoning, or you just kind of ate something that was a little questionable, just in terms of your health and vitality and focus. You just feel toxicity or poisoned, quite frankly. So they are very effective drugs. Certainly if you're obese or diabetic, you know, consult with your doctor about those options. But what's interesting about these Moro blood oranges is they do seem to have an effect in terms of lowering body weight, reducing waist and hip size, and decreasing body mass index. I actually wanted to review the results of two particular clinical trials that were actually well done from a scientific basis. One was actually published in 2015 that was looking at this Moro blood orange supplementation. They gave an extract of it called morosil, which is basically a patented proprietary juice extract, 400 milligrams a day in overweight, healthy, but otherwise healthy human volunteers, and looked at the results over the course of 12 weeks. So here's the interesting thing, and what I liked about it is that this was a placebo-controlled study. So they did compare it to a placebo, which I think is really important in weight loss studies because people do obviously lose weight. You give people a magic pill or you tell them to lose weight or they're trying to lose weight, they're going to do other things. So here was the interesting thing of how does this morosil supplemental extract compare to placebo? So when it came to body weight, these folks actually did a pretty compelling job of losing their body weight. So they actually dropped their body weight from, I'm going to just quickly do the math here. They dropped about 3.08 kilos, which if we're going to convert to pounds, so they basically lost about 6.8 pounds in the course of 12 weeks, which is actually a pretty good weight loss result. The folks in the placebo group only lost half a kilogram or about 1 pound. So that's actually a statistically significant difference. You're talking about losing almost 7 pounds compared to 1 pound. That's not just placebo, right? So it's actually significantly outperforming placebo in terms of weight loss. And this is just basically taking one little pill that's a fruit extract, essentially. Relatively safe in the relative scheme of potential interventions. The other interesting thing, though, is that they also looked at waist and hip circumference, and they found statistically significant improvements in waist and hip circumference that were actually quite impressive. So the waist circumference actually dropped by 7 centimeters, or that's about 2.75 inches, right? So if you think about that, you're almost dropping about 3 inches off of your waist, which is enough that you'd clearly notice a difference if you're, that's a whole basically waist size or pant size decrease around reducing the central adiposity around your waist. The placebo group only saw about a 0.8 centimeter loss in waist circumference, or about 0.3 inches. So again, this is crushing placebo in terms of 2.75 inch decrease on the waist versus 0.3 inch decrease in the waist. So that is a pretty statistically significant difference, and also saw a decrease in hip circumference as well. So it was actually pretty impressive results from a 12-week study. You're seeing significant drops in body weight and waist circumference, which arguably is actually more important than just body weight. We know that central adiposity, in particular the body fat around the waist, is more predictive of negative health outcomes than just body weight alone. And this is literally just from a juice supplement, essentially. So people were asking, of course, well, this is a 12-week study. What happens if you follow people for a longer period of time? And that is a great question. There was actually a more recent study that was just published in January of 2022 in the journal Nutrients that looked again at overweight but otherwise healthy men and women and did a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled study. So this is the gold standard of studies, meaning that these people were randomized. They randomly selected you to either take the morosil supplement or placebo, and it was double-blind, meaning that the patients didn't know what they were taking and the experimenters didn't know who was taking which one until after the trial was over. So really the highest standard of scientific credibility in terms of the studies. So they were looking at these folks, they were aged 20 to 65, randomized to either get that moral blood orange standardized extract in the form of morosil or a placebo, took it 400 milligrams daily for 6 months. So the last study was done over the course of 12 weeks or about 3 months. So doubled the length of the intervention. And the results were the results were as strong as the previous study, but the placebo group did a little bit better. And that may be just because, I don't know, if you track people for 6 months, they may lose a little bit more weight. So they found basically the morosil group dropped 4.2% of their body mass or body weight. In the previous study, I think they lost about 4%. So very comparable results. The difference was this time around, placebo lost a little bit more weight. They lost 2.2%. So relatively speaking, experimental group lost 4.2%, placebo group lost 2.2%. So there's a 2% difference between the groups, right? So you're reducing the effect of the placebo. But there also were statistically significant improvements, as I mentioned, in hip and waist circumference. In this study, they dropped 3.9 centimeters in the experimental group, or if you convert that to inches, about 1.5 inches. Now remember, the previous study had a more impressive result of 2.75 inches, and the placebo group this time around had also a more impressive effect, 1.7 centimeters, which is the equivalent of 0.66 or 2/3 of an inch. So this time around, not as clinically meaningful improvements, but still statistically significant. So you're talking about dropping 1.5 inches off your waist versus 0.66 or 2/3 of an inch. So the difference, of course, would be about 0.84. So almost an inch difference between the experimental and the placebo group. But at this point, I actually find these results pretty compelling in the sense that there's 2 randomized placebo-controlled trials on this. Now, I would like to see more research being done before you can kind of conclusively make some conclusion regarding this particular supplement. But given the relative safety, it's literally just a fruit extract from blood oranges, probably very minimal chance of side effects. Doesn't have an adverse mechanism of action such as causing nausea or anything. If the juice was probably available, you could just consume these things, but it's a very particular type of blood orange. Now, that's an interesting question, by the way. Would this work just from eating normal blood oranges? Probably. Now, like I said, this particular cultivar that's only in Sicily, and they have exclusive rights to produce it for the supplement, which is very convenient for the manufacturer, of course. There may be something special about it. We don't know, but I would just conjecture to say probably would work from just eating blood oranges. But it's also a regularly available extract. You can actually go buy it on Amazon if you just type morosil. I think you can get a month supply for like $20, and has probably very little downside. I've looked through the anecdotal reviews of people who are taking this. Some people find it beneficial. There's a lot of people who also do not find it beneficial and did not do anything for their weight loss. So TLDR, there is no magic pill for weight loss. In fact, we know from the DPP clinical trial that lifestyle intervention, which is making behavior changes, actually outperforms the prescription metformin in terms of weight loss and diabetes risk reduction. So the best thing you can do to lose weight is, fix your diet, quite frankly, and fix your sleep. If you're going to do something on top of that, this particular extract may be promising. Research is very preliminary, but at least from the 2 trials that were done, I actually find the results pretty impressive in terms of the weight loss results and the body fat reduction results around waist circumference are actually on par with a lot of, quite frankly, even the behavioral intervention. So people are losing just as much weight basically from popping a supplement every morning as they are with typical diet and exercise changes. So obviously you should try to do both things together, but if a supplement is basically doing as well as diet or exercise changes, or at least just like, mildly efficacious versions of those interventions, then I actually find that quite impressive. So I think it's a pretty promising supplement, not necessarily making medical advice or recommendation to take it, but I do think it is kind of a new thing that's hitting the market. And everyone's trying to lose a little bit of that belly fat. So it may be worth experimenting. Obviously, consult with your physician. But given it's also, a fruit extract from blood oranges, it's probably pretty safe. So that's this week's unpopular opinion about why, also further evidence about why fruits are more important, in my opinion, than consuming vegetables, and particularly these more ancestral fruits that are very potent in terms of their phytochemicals, such as the anthocyanins in this particular cultivar of blood oranges, provide more evidence for why we should be consuming these things. All right, with that being said, we should pop on and see if there's anyone on the Zoom. Hey there.
Hi.
How's it going?
Well, how are you?
Doing well. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. Can you hear me?
Yeah, happy to be here.
Excellent, excellent. How can I help you?
What I want to talk about today was hormone optimization, in particular for sports performance, for
Mm-hmm.
hypertrophy, increasing lean muscle mass, and that topic.
Okay, excellent. Let's talk about it.
I've been I've worked out in the past, and I've always plateaued rather quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started again, and I'm trying to put my right foot forward. And I was just wondering if you could give me any advice that I might not hear about. I have a high protein diet
Mm-hmm.
with a little bit of fat and some carbohydrates, and I work out 4 to 5 days a week at least. Doing weightlifting and cardio.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's about as far as I've gotten, like that seems to be like the general advice you get.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's certainly good foundational advice. What would you say your goals are?
Just general strength and like more ability to do the things I love doing, like, like hiking. I want to be able to carry a heavy backpack up a mountain
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully, more than just one peak. I'd like to be able to do a ridge at a time. I live near a mountain range. That's like a fun activity that I'd like to be able to do, but it just takes too much out of me to do it right now. Like,
Mm-hmm.
to fit it into a weekend, then I'll be dragging when I go back to work on Monday. I'm that's kind of my goal, is to be able to do fun things like that.
For sure. Yeah, I think that makes sense in terms of some sport specific training and certainly feeling equipped that you can go do that on a particular weekend. Can you tell me a little bit more about your exercise routine, like the 4 or 5 workouts? Like, can you break down what you're specifically doing in those workouts?
Yeah, sure. So I've got uh, like a workout routine. And So let me just pull it up just to refresh my recollection. So when I get to the gym, I
Hmm.
take out this app called Fitbod, and I've got my workouts saved to
Right.
it. It can generate workouts for you, but I have particular ones I do. So like on Tuesdays, I'm doing a squat, leg extension, machine leg press, and dumbbell lunge, and
Okay.
then I do a core workout. And I could go on. I could go through each workout. On
S-
Wednesdays, I'm doing dumbbell bench press, machine fly, skull crushers, barbell bench press, and low cable chest fly.
Okay. So it sounds like chest and triceps day, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Each day I have something I target, and yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. And the only thing that I plan on changing soon is I'm targeting generally each muscle like once per week. I wear it out really
Right.
well, and I want to start doing it twice a week. That's like the next step for me. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's where I'm at.
Are you lifting 4 days a week? Where is the cardio coming in?
So the cardio, I do. So I'm a little off schedule, but I do it 4 days a week. And but the schedule that I try to stick to, that I'm going to go back to, I'm a day off this schedule, but it's the same thing. So on Sunday I do. No, on Saturday I do an open-ended run of like 3 to 4 miles. Just I go for 40 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and then on Monday I do a like a moderate volume distance run, and I do intervals. So I do some walking,
Mm-hmm.
and then I run for a couple minutes, then I walk, and then I run for a couple minutes.
Right.
And I do stretching before and after the running.
Mm-hmm.
And then on Tuesdays I do a more intense tempo run, um, with stretching, of course. And
Mm-hmm.
then on let's see, on Thursday, I do a low intensity run,
Okay.
just kind of to, relax a little bit and still get a run in.
So you sounds like you're running some variation 4 days a week, correct?
Yep,
And
yep.
how
Some
many?
variation 4 days a week.
And then how many days are you lifting?
5 days.
Okay, so are you doing like 2 a days on a lot of those days, basically?
Yeah, I'm doing 2 workouts in 11 days.
Okay. How does your recovery? Do you feel recovered from doing all that?
So when I started doing it, I was struggling a little bit. I've got a coach though, and they told me to just power through it. Just keep going, and it's okay. Just don't hurt yourself. But,
Right.
and they were checking on me, but they were like, you still want to do a workout even if you're sore. And I would have delayed onset muscle soreness, where like half the week my legs would be sore and half the week my upper body would be sore. And I kind of beat that though, and now it's just like a mild soreness. It doesn't really bother me very much. That's why I was thinking of adding another day for each muscle.
Okay, that makes sense. And how much sleep are you getting?
Um, Usually around 8 hours, but that's kind of actually, if I was wiser, I'd probably be talking to you about sleep because
Mm.
maybe that's where I'm lacking. I usually go to bed by 10 or 11, and
Hmm.
I wake up at 8, and I wake up tired. But
Hmm.
that's not changed since the exercise. That's always been that way. And I was hoping the exercise would change that actually, and it hasn't.
Yeah, it's unusual if you're feeling tired, especially after getting 8 hours of sleep. Like, do you know if you snore or have any sleep quality issues? Like, are you tossing and turning throughout the night? Are you waking up throughout the night? Has your partner ever told you you snore?
No, nothing like that, honestly. Historically speaking, I used to grind my teeth, but I don't think I do anymore because my teeth don't hurt than they used to hurt. So I think I was just stressed out when I was a student, and
Yeah,
now that I'm not a
but
student, I
many
have
many
more.
students are. I don't blame you there.
Yeah.
What's your height and weight?
So I'm 5'11", and I've put on a little bit of weight since I started working out. I'm about 170. I'm at a caloric excess though, so
Yeah.
that's planned. It's not something out of control.
No, so you're clearly not overweight. You're actually at a good height or weight. And like, how does it look in the mirror? Like, do you have a six pack? How lean are you, especially around the waist?
You can see my abs, but
Hmm.
I don't have a six pack, I wouldn't say.
Yeah.
But like you can see the top of my abs, and then I have a little bit of belly at like the bottom of my abs.
How long have you been lifting weights, especially like this?
Just for like a little over a month now.
What were you doing? So before you were just running?
So actually, before I wasn't doing anything, and I put on a few pounds. So I used to have a job where I was a little bit active. I was like, hauling equipment places,
Yeah.
doing IT, and then I got a desk job doing software engineering,
Hmm.
and I literally don't move all day long. I'm just
Right.
sitting at a desk. So I was like, I need to like get up and get in shape. So I made a concerted effort.
That's awesome.
I was just at a healthy weight already, though. I had a good diet all along, so my weight never got out of control.
Makes sense. Well, I mean, it's phenomenal that you got from being sounds like pretty sedentary to being quite active. What inspired or you to just, I don't know, make that change in your life?
Honestly, I stopped drinking and I just
Mm.
started caring more about my health. Like this not drinking just prompted me to be like, well, I should make other healthy changes, and
Yeah.
this is like the obvious one to make.
Phenomenal. Well, that's such a great story, and hopefully it's inspirational to other people. I actually talk a lot about sort of the downsides of alcohol use. Not that I necessarily think everyone should abstain or be a teetotaler, but certainly science is pretty conclusive that it's certainly not healthy in any dosage, quite frankly. But I think you highlight something much more important, which is the demotivational aspect of alcohol. I also talk about this with marijuana. It's not motivating, right? When you're drunk or high, you're not doing great things. You're generally not working out, as anyone has ever tried to work out while inebriated or hungover. It doesn't feel great, and so oftentimes we find that when we quit drinking, one's energy and motivation and all these things come back. And so it's great to hear that story, and I hope other people find inspiration to cut down a little bit, even if they don't abstain completely. Are you on our protocol?
Yeah, so that's one thing that I did start doing that I thought might help me break through plateaus is I started doing the King Protocol, and but I've only been on it for like a week.
Yep.
My testosterone, it wasn't exactly high, but it was it was in the normal range. So let me pull it up here. It was 286 was my total testosterone,
Do you know what
but
your
my
free was?
SHBG was low.
Yeah. Do you know what your free testosterone was?
No, I didn't compute that.
Do you know what your SHB is? It is, so I can calculate it.
15.7.
Yeah, you're definitely a low SHBG guy. And what was your total again? 280?
286.
286. Okay, so your testosterone actually it's technically in the normal range, but barely. Like that's right around actually where the cutoff would be, depending on what the lab reference range is for hypogonadism. However, in your case though, because your SHBG is naturally low, which a lot of folks are. By the way, have you ever had your blood sugar tested? Do you have any family history of type 2 diabetes?
I don't have a family history, and I have been tested. I also get my A1C checked periodically, and I'm not diabetic.
Awesome. Do you remember what your A1C was?
I'd have to look it up. I
Yeah.
mean, it would take me like a minute probably to look it up. I'd have to like log into the.
Yeah. I mean, the good news is, I mean, your body weight, you're not overweight. So, given that and how healthy, well, recently your lifestyle is, I think you're pretty good. You should monitor, though, obviously, your blood sugar and A1C. I always tell people this: low SHBG folks are genetically predisposed, essentially, to diabetes. So you're not in that situation now, but you should just monitor it because you have higher chance of insulin resistance. So you're someone who should probably like just watch their carbohydrate intake. Certainly avoid getting fat because you probably can't tolerate it, quite frankly, as much as other people do. Sounds like you're in a good position now. Your job is to just maintain that. There's other people who unfortunately can put on a bunch of weight, eat shitty, and not get diabetes. You are not one of them because of your SHBG. So that's the bad news. Good news is you have higher free testosterone as a result of having low SHBG. So even though your total is really low, your free is actually not bad. It's 80.2, which is it is in the normal range to your point, but it's not optimal, right? Where especially for someone who you sound kind of, how old are you?
I'm 30.
Yeah, you're young. You sound like a young guy, and obviously you're in good shape, not overweight. So you shouldn't really be low, right? So if you look at the reference range for 19 to 39-year-old men, which you're obviously in that range, 50th percentile is like 134, fifth percentile 77. So you're technically like at basically the sixth percentile, which means 94% of men have higher free testosterone than you. So you definitely have some room for improvement. So I'm glad that obviously you got on the King Protocol. This is also one of these great examples, by the way, of like why our clinic is so important because insurance generally doesn't like to pay unless you're below the second and a half percentile. You're sixth, so you just barely missed the cutoff, technically speaking. Insurance wouldn't pay for it, but like, would you benefit from treatment? Clearly. So I have a couple thoughts, and thank you for answering all those questions, just because I think it gives me a lot of good context. One, the good news is you've made a lot of these lifestyle changes recently, and you're quite frankly kind of like a novice slash amateur to weightlifting. The good news with that is you actually have a high likelihood to be able to put on a bunch of muscle from what are called newbie gains, right? So when you haven't been lifting very much, your body is it's an interesting phenomenon. I think I've talked about it in previous shows. Your body is almost like starved of the muscle mass that should be there, that's just not there because of basically inactivity or disuse, right? If you had like grown up, I don't know, on a farm, throwing hay, bales of hay around versus software engineering, you probably would have more muscle just from, you know, you're almost doing like natural weightlifting. But because unfortunately we live in such a sedentary society, particularly if you have a white collar job, we really do get sort of physical disuse and muscular atrophy essentially that happens. So the moment that you start lifting weights, you're going to start putting on muscle, and it's actually quite possible that you put on about 10 to 15 pounds in the first year that you do weightlifting. So that's the good news. And in fact, the interesting thing is most actually hypertrophy happens, 80% of it really happens when you first start weightlifting. That's the frustration that a lot of folks like me who've probably been lifting for like 2 decades now have, is like, it's very hard for me to put on any muscle at this point because you've kind of maxed out your natural gains. So the first thing I would say is I think you're doing all the right things. You just need to be patient in the sense that you're new to this. You're about 1 month in. Look, at this point, you should be able to put on about 1 pound plus or minus like maybe 0.2, just guesstimating there, you should be able to put on 1 pound of lean mass per month in the first year. Especially at the height and weight that you're at, you're a little on the lower side in terms of someone who um, like your absolute peak fat-free mass index. Like you could be 5'11" and I would say 180, 185 if you're kind of, ripped or jacked. That's like the upper end of probably your like natural genetic potential, naturally, right? So I think you just need to keep up the good work. Honestly, give it another 11 months, and like I said, just maintain your hypercaloric state that you're in now, and keep paying attention to the scale. You should be, like I said, putting on about 1 pound a month. And obviously, you want to watch the mirror, or you can use something like an Amazon Halo band if you want to use. Suggest that for body fat monitoring. It uses computer vision and AI to actually take pictures of your front, back, both sides. You can track your body fat over time. It's not necessary. I always just tell people, look, the mirror test is a good enough test. You just look in the mirror. Do you look good? Do you look different? You can tell when you're doing the right thing. But if you want to quantify it, it's actually a pretty neat tool. It's actually accurate within about 2% of the DEXA scan, which is the gold standard, and it's only like $70. You can pick it up on Amazon. I think it's free for the first 6 months, and then it's a $3 subscription thereafter. So it's actually probably one of the coolest tools, I think, for body fat monitoring out there. But I think you're doing all the right things. Maintaining the slight hypercaloric state was also going to be really important for you. In terms of, you need to, generally speaking, be consuming excess calories. Now, you don't want to go overboard, but I would say that's where either using the mirror test or the Halo would be useful. If you're starting to put on too much fat, like you're really getting sloppy around the waist, then maybe just use that as a sign to tone back the calories. If you're gaining, honestly, more than 2 pounds a month, you're probably overdoing it. So I would say just triangulate by using those kind of 1 to 3 variables to make sure that you're not excessively eating. But I think that should be a useful rubric for you. The other thing I would say is at this point, like working out 4 or 5 days a week. So there's kind of this perennial argument in the kind of the hypertrophy world about like how often do you need to work out. There's kind of people in the volumetric camp. There's a lot of research that basically argues that more volume is better. That up to like 20 sets per muscle group per week actually optimizes hypertrophy. And there's another camp that's all about intensity, right? Dorian Yates would only work out 4 times a week for 45 minutes, only work a muscle group 1 time per week, but he would crush it. If you ever want to go watch the documentary, which is free on YouTube, Blood and Guts, go watch him work out and you understand what intensity means. They're like screaming in each other's faces, and they're going to like complete muscular exhaustion. Now that is not, easy for most people to do, but they need greater rest in order to do that, in order to not be terribly sore and let the muscle grow, obviously. They're obviously on a lot of anabolic steroids as well. I don't think you necessarily need a 5th day to answer your question. It just depends. I think if you're going at a little bit more of like a moderate intensity, you could do another day. If you're doing a higher intensity, you could actually do less. So I think it's kind of a variable based on you either kind of do high volume or you can do high intensity, but you can't do both. So you gotta have to pick which one you want to do, or you can kind of sit in the middle and be like moderate volume, moderate intensity, and then that's the happy medium for you. But I would say just pick what you're willing to do and able to sustain long term. And then the other part of it is you may want to consider cutting back a little bit on the cardio. 4 or 5 days of intense weightlifting plus 4 or 5 days of running may be a lot, especially for someone who's just gotten into it. If you were kind of like a more advanced, athlete or weightlifter, I would say, it's more possible. I agree with your coach in that, yeah, you can kind of work through the muscular soreness around it, but it's a lot to work through, and all the cardio that you're doing is not going to really help you gain much muscle. I'm not anti-cardio. I just think if you're doing a lot of weightlifting, you don't particularly need to be doing a lot of cardio or running. Now, the bodybuilders were doing it, but they also were on a lot of steroids that basically allowed their recovery to be much greater than the average person. With you, even though you're on our protocol, it's not the same as anabolic steroids. You have to kind of watch your recovery, particularly if you're waking up tired. I kind of take that a little bit as a physiological sign that you may be temporarily or acutely overtrained a little bit. So unless you're really training for racing or running, I know you kind of want to do the mountain climbing a little bit. You may want to consider toning that down. I actually find walking to be a much more helpful complement to weightlifting. Where do you know how many steps a day you're doing, or do you track that at all?
So I actually take so few steps outside of working out that
Yeah.
I don't bother wearing my Apple Watch except when I work out.
Fair enough. So here's the thing: you may want to consider, if you're willing, and you feel like you're a little tired, substituting the walking for the running. Where generally speaking, research guidelines suggest about 8,000 steps a day is a good thing to shoot for healthy young adults. And it doesn't tax the central nervous system as much, obviously, as running does. So if you feel like you're starting to get a little overtrained, or you're waking up and you're still feeling really tired, I would really cut the running down to like a day a week. Do the interval workout that you mentioned for that day a week, where you're getting a little speed work in, feeling light on your legs. But I don't know if like you really need to do 3 extra days of running. It's certainly not going to help your hypertrophy. It may help a little bit with fat loss. That's the reason most of the bodybuilders, particularly in the golden era, were doing some jogging and stuff. They were trying to stay super lean. But in your case, you're already kind of lean, even though the central adiposity is not perfect. I think a lot of that, honestly, the fat will come off anyway. You're just 1 month into your exercise routine. So I think at this point, I wouldn't even be too stressed about it. So that's my 2 cents. Is I would start to swap out, cut maybe the running down to 1 day a week. Make sure you're walking 8,000 steps a day, no matter what. Now that could include the day of running, but that I think prevents the overtraining. And then continue to just monitor how you feel. I would say 90 minutes after you wake up. Sometimes people just feel groggy when they wake up, depending on what stage of sleep you woke up in. The real telltale sign for me is 90 minutes after you wake up. Are you still tired? If that's the case, then okay, maybe there's something going on. You're either not sleeping well enough, or you're overtraining and you're not getting enough rest. So I think tweaking those things would probably be more optimal. Otherwise, I think it's just about sticking with it. And are you doing any sort of like progressive overload or type of system